Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today for this third in our series that Zeldis has done with B2B populations around technology. We did volume one early in 2025 with financial professionals about how they use tech stacks when it comes to working with their clients for investing, retirement, that kind of thing. And then volume two in the fall with PNC brokers and agents about how they use technology in their business. And here we are with volume three, which we're going to be talking about how employers use technology to manage and administer benefits. And when we talk about employees, when we're going to be talking about these employers, we're talking about folks who work in HR and benefits, so EBMs or HR professionals. Everyone who participated in this research is responsible for the benefits for their company, variety of titles. So let's talk a little bit about what we did, and then I'll take you through what we learned. Um, so we did 10 in-depth interviews with employers. Um, I moderated all of the interviews. We talked to folks in a range of company sizes. So we didn't talk to the real small end of the market, the under 50, but we talked to folks anywhere from 50 employees to 10,000 plus employees. And you can see kind of the range there. We tried to kind of spread it out in that sort of higher end of the small market, the middle market, and then up market. We had a couple with 3,000. We had one with a little over 3,000, one with over 10,000 employees, so that we could get kind of a broad range of views and experiences. We talked to a range of industries, a really nice kind of mix of different industries, nonprofit, professional services, science, technology, manufacturing, construction, wholesale. So kind of a variety in terms of kind of work they do and also the kinds of employees that they employ. Range of geography across the US. We did speak to some companies that have international presence, but we focus on their benefits within the US, and most of our respondents were primarily US based. Everybody who participated offers medical, dental, vision, life, disability benefits, as well as some voluntary. Some offer a huge range of voluntary, some offer one or two, accident, critical illness, hospital, pet, legal, a number of different kind of voluntary benefits. And I just want to also mention, to source the sample for this research, we used a company called Ivy Exec. They're part of MR Innovate now, but we've been using them for quite a long time when we need to find, difficult to reach populations, B2B populations, where the quality of the respondent is really important. And they've done a great job at getting us a whole range of folks. We do, financial professionals and brokers and agents, but in this case, employers, and they've always found great ones for us to talk to. So, what did we talk about with these employers? So we started out as you often do in qualitative, right, at the high level, um, talking about technology. How does technology change the role of managing benefits? How has it changed your job when it comes to benefits? And a lot of the folks we spoke to in this research have been doing this for a very long time. So some 10 years, some 20, some more than 20. So they've been around enough to see kind of the impact of technology over time. And as you might imagine, it's fundamentally transformed benefits administration, especially over the last decade. But even, before that, and even more recently, there's just constantly changes. A big one is the use of HRIS, um, and or a benefits admin system, but HRIS largely to integrate payroll and benefits administration. So we're going to talk a little bit about HRIS and Ben admin in a bit, but that's been a change over time that all of these folks are using some kind of system like that. Um, Reduced administrative burden, partially because everything's moved from paper to online, right? And these folks remember when things were paper. Part of that is the enrollment is all done online through a platform. They don't have employees filling out their elections and submitting the paperwork. Automated file feeds, which we're going to talk about, that makes for, enrollment and changes to be a little more seamless and require less manual labor. Real-time reporting, getting access to your data, seeing what's going on. with your claims, your employees' claims. All of that has really changed things. And I should mention, you know, I do research with employers quite a bit. I talk to hundreds of employers a year in qualitative, plus quantitative surveys. And what I've seen and what we hear is that the job of sort of EBM or HR has just gotten harder and harder. Like there's just more on their plate, right? They have more responsibilities, they're wearing more hats, they're doing more things. So they need a reduced administrative burden because they're doing more with less. And so they need systems in place that make their job easier so that they have time to do all of the different things that they have to do. Of course, as you get up market, it becomes more specialized in benefits, but really I mean, even some larger companies, but really anything, in under 1,000 employees, you may have the same person who's doing hiring and personnel decisions and strategic planning and payroll, maybe, not always, and benefits, right? They're doing the whole thing, employee relations, everything. So the bandwidth is a challenge. Gosh, I mean, the person we spoke to in this research who had over 10,000 employees, it's him and one and a half other people doing it. Now they outsource a ton, but still that's crazy. And that's not the case across the board. There are some bigger teams and smaller teams. But all to say that technology is incredibly important today in terms of helping HR folks do what they need to do. We also asked all our respondents, what are your, top challenges when it comes to benefits at your organization, right? What keeps you up at night? We were looking to see if there's any technology related challenges that come up. You'll see there's a little bit, but generally not. But what's interesting is that when they bring up their challenges, their key challenges are not necessarily technology, but they see technology as a potential solution for the challenges they're facing. We're going to talk about that throughout, but I'm just going to kind of walk you through at a high level. So I bet anyone on this webinar could guess what everyone said was their number one challenge. Literally everyone we talked to, what they say their number one challenge when it comes to benefits. Um, that's costs. Costs, because it's costs like just, the increase year over year. And in a lot of cases, people talk about just sort of the deval rate. You're getting less robust benefits for more cost year over year. I spoke to one person who saw a 45% increase this last year. Now that's an outlier for sure, but this is what folks are faced with. And it has to do with, just the amount that they have to spend as a company. It has to do with trying to balance what they're spending with the ability to attract and retain employees, because that's part of the goal of offering benefits to your employees. I mean, part of it is to do the right thing, but part of it is because you want to attract and retain the best employees. And what we're hearing is that that's becoming a struggle to balance the cost with that. And then balancing what you're paying as a company versus what you're asking your employee to pay, right? So that cost sharing and how that changes and how you try to make it affordable and still give them something, all of that, right? So no surprise, top of the list. What does it have to do with technology? Well, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but employers are looking for technology solutions to help with costs. So telemedicine is one, and that's a technology solution for them. That's how they view it. But also AI, not surprising, right? And potentially the carrier's use of AI to streamline things, to help reduce costs. So again, we'll dive into that a little bit more. The second biggest challenge that we heard was employee education when it comes to benefits and how that impacts their utilization, their enrollment and their utilization of benefits. That is something that I feel like since I've been doing this for employer research for, I don't even want to tell you how many years, this has been an issue that has not been able to be solved, which is to get employees to understand their benefits, engage, and kind of really take the time. And again, employers see that potentially technology in the form of decision support tools, ideally decision support tools that integrate AI, which again we'll talk about later, is a potential help in this area or could be. And then some other things we heard, bandwidth and resources. I already covered that these folks are just kind of struggling to get everything they need to get done. That comes with the administrative burden, right? Trying to reduce that so they have a little bit more bandwidth. The last one here, errors, mistakes. In some cases, this is technology. In some cases, there are problems with file feeds, which we will hear about from respondents in a bit. Not always, but that's the only kind of technology related challenge that comes up. Now, again, they're looking for potentially AI to help with some of these things, help reduce the burden, and just better systems, more integrated systems, fewer issues between systems, all of that technology related. So we also asked folks, what drives your decision to select a carrier? Why are you choosing one carrier over another? Again, wanted to see kind of where technology falls in the decision matrix. Not surprisingly, right? Cost is going to dominate carrier selection because that's their biggest challenge, right? That's what they're struggling with day to day. So that is going to be the number one. And then with medical and dental carriers, network is number two, right? That's up there. That's a primary factor along with cost. But beyond those two things, technology absolutely is a differentiator and a decision driver. Okay, so it's, and everybody we spoke to, there's a baseline of technology that even it's almost primary because you're not even in the consideration set if you can't meet that baseline of technology. There are certain things you need to be able to offer. There is generally a consensus that most carriers across the board, there's parity at that baseline level, right? Everyone can do kind of the basics. But I did have one of the respondents mention a regional carrier that they couldn't even consider because they didn't even have the most basic. You couldn't even look at their bills online. They couldn't do anything. So they didn't consider them, and now that carrier is out of business. So for the most part, though, most major carriers meet that baseline. Then beyond that, it becomes that sort of second tier decision-making factor after cost and network, where that can be the decision, right? If cost is similar, network is similar, technology is going to be in the next kind of set of things that they consider. It's even going to be more important when it comes to medical carriers. Although also mentioned is absence management as an important, depending on the size of the company, as an important carrier in terms of technology. So that's kind of the high level view, the 10,000-foot view. Then we asked, we took our respondents through, what types of technology are you using? What are the key pieces of technology that you use when it comes to benefits? So we're going to kind of walk through those. I already kind of touched on this, but the HRIS or Ben admin system, that is going to be the central hub for employee data and benefits management. That's going to be the starting point. That's where you go, kind of the baseline. A lot of these folks, that's the most integral piece of technology that they are using. And I apologize in advance if I say HRIS system, because the S in HRIS is system, but I still do it all the time. So apologies in advance if I do that. So here's something that came up when it comes to HRIS and Ben admin, right? Most folks we spoke to have an HRIS and they use the benefits administration functionality within that HRIS to manage their benefits. Occasionally, and sometimes more upmarket, they'll have a separate Ben admin platform outside of the HRIS to manage benefits. But most don't. And so what happens is, depending on the company, sometimes the HRIS is selected primarily because of the payroll need, that's driving the HRIS selection is payroll. And that all the other things that you might use your HRIS for, benefits management, enrollment platform, hiring, performance, right? It has all different kinds of functionality in the HR space. All of that is great, but you're a lot of times the selection of HRIS is based on payroll, like what can do payroll the best, right? There are some that are driven. That's where they started. They started in payroll and they kind of added the other things on. Not always, sometimes. And again, the bigger you are, benefits are important enough that is driving selection, or you're choosing a separate Ben admin system. When HRIS and Ben admin systems work well, it's because they have seamless integration both within the functions within the HRIS and with file feeds externally when they're dealing with other aspects, like vendors or outside, could be TPA. comprehensive benefits functionality, and user-friendly interfaces. When things don't work well, some of the issues are usually a lack of functionality. And again, you hear when the system is more driven by a payroll selection that it may not have the best benefits functionality, or you have to pay extra for extra benefits function. We would love to be able to do that, and the system could do that, but we would have to pay for that. So when you don't either, it's a system that wasn't driven to help manage benefits, or the company won't pay for those extras and there's lack of a functionality that can be challenging. Poor reporting also comes up, complex interfaces that are hard to work with, poor customer support on the back end. All of those things are mentioned as sort of problems with HRS or Ben admin systems. We did ask folks about the systems they use and to give us feedback on that. Obviously, this is very qualitative. We had 10 respondents. We have seven platforms that were evaluated. So, you're talking about one or two people giving their opinion, but we're still going to share that. Paylocity was one, and highly satisfied with the integration and the automation that Paylocity can do, including the file feeds, works really well. Have had some issues with open enrollment platform. Rippling, also really positive response, really seen as tech forward, including integrating AI. And we'll actually talk about an example of that in a bit. ADP gets mixed feedback, and this is exactly what I was talking about. So, ADP, the payroll functionality is great. The HR and benefits functionality is lacking, at least, according to this person. And ADP is a payroll driven platform. That's how they started. Employee Navigator is very common. We see it a lot in smaller market because it's something that brokers offer for free for employers, usually smaller employers. So that makes it cost effective, right? But it isn't the most robust. It has more limited functionality. But for a smaller company, sometimes that's fine. Sage was mentioned as older and more basic. Oracle also got some negative feedback, specifically around not having out of the box functionality, requiring a lot of customization. So if you want to do X with Oracle, you need to go back to the programmers and have them do that. It's not like a built-in component. And UKG also kind of negative feedback here with our respondents in terms of not having great benefits functionality or reporting, and really being a little more outdated, is the feedback that we received. So that's the HRIS. Like I said, that's kind of where a lot of folks are going. And I would say even more so now than when I was doing this 5 or 10 years ago, the Ben admin platform or the HRIS platform has become really the core that employers are using to manage the benefits. Even to the point where they're accessing carrier stuff through that versus going separately. But we'll talk about that on the next slide. Because the next thing we asked about was portals and apps. And we came at this with the thought of like carrier portals and apps that you're using, both employee and employer. And that is largely the feedback that we received. But we also heard about the HRIS or Ben admin system and what they might offer, because some of them offer functionality for employees where employees can access the app and then access their different carriers through that. So let's talk about that. So the first thing I was maybe a little surprised to hear is that employers are really prioritizing the employee portals and apps. They care more about that than the portal that they might use as the employer. They really want the employee experience to be easy and positive, but also, and this is key, they're looking for employees to be able to self-service, right? They're looking for employees to be able to use the portal or app to do what they need to do when it comes to their benefits. And that takes something off HR's plate, right? Because if they didn't have that 5 years ago, they're coming to the employer with all of those questions, and the employer is going to need to figure it out. If employers can push their employees to self-service, it really reduces their administrative burden. And it takes something off their plate. That's not to say that they're not there. They think it's really important to have a human backstop, both at the carrier, someone who can answer the phone and talk to people, but also as themselves, kind of answering employees' questions. They absolutely believe that because they do say, they do acknowledge, it comes up quite a bit, that there are demographic differences, right? And so maybe younger employees are more comfortable on an app than older employees who might want a little more human interaction, or just the type of employee in terms of being tech savvy, being out in the field, maybe not being so comfortable. So all of that comes into play and is why you need a human. But they love the fact that more and more employees can self-service. Some use the carrier apps or portals, but some are using the HRIS or Ben Admin app. And that's the example in this quote that I have here. They are with their phones, and if they have an app, we use Paylocity. I push as much as I can if it's possible because they will do everything on their app. And in this case, through Paylocity, they could access their different benefits without having to go to a number of different carrier apps, which was seen as definitely a positive. In terms of the employer, they're using carrier portals less so than they used to. Now, this isn't across the board. There was some variation, and you had some people who were using them all the time, every day, every week. But the general consensus was they're doing that less because a lot of what they used to do in a carrier portal, like adds and terminates, for example, the file feeds are taking care of that, right? That's happening automatically. Or they're doing things through their HRIS or Ben admin system. Or for reporting, their broker is doing it for them, right? Or they're doing it through HRS, but they don't have to go into the carrier portal as much. When they do, they're checking, maybe a claim status for an employee or looking at bills. That's something that they're still doing often. So interesting that kind of the employee interface from the carrier tends to be the priority here. So let's talk about file feeds. File feeds, to be frank, is part of the reason we did this research because it's just come up a lot for us with different clients over the last few years as an important topic, something we hear about a lot when we talk to employers, because a file feed can be a game changer, right? All of this stuff that had to be done manually is now automated, and that can take a lot of work off somebody's plate. But it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So every employer we spoke to in this research uses some type of automated file feed integration. They might not use it with every single vendor and carrier, but they use it when they can and they use it with most, and they're all using it in some way, right? So occasionally, you have somebody who uses it for most, but maybe they have a point solution like a one-off vendor that doesn't do it or would charge for it, and so they don't do it with that one. They're using a mix. Some are using EDIs, some are using APIs, probably more EDIs than APIs. APIs, sometimes both, right? The same employee, like one vendor, one carrier has an API and one has an EDI, depending on everybody's capabilities. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a technical person, right? So EDIs are generally you're setting up a file format. It should look like this. You're matching all the fields, and then the system's exporting and it's being imported into that. Whereas an API is more of a direct connection between the two systems. And generally, that is seen as better, as working better, as being more accurate, as being easier, fewer issues. So folks are generally like moving in that direction. When there is a problem, and we'll talk about when there's a problem, generally it is attributed to the employer generally puts the blame on the HRIS or Ben admin system versus the carrier. Not always. Not always. Sometimes they see it as the carrier's fault, problem to solve. Sometimes they see it, but more often they see it as HRS. And sometimes they don't know. They don't know. They can't figure out which side it's on, and that can be incredibly frustrating. When file feeds work well, they are wonderful. They save time, they improve accuracy, they're taking kind of human error out of the mix, which is great. They take away this huge process that used to be done manually, which is a huge administrative burden that is relieved. However, when they don't work, it causes major headaches and frustrations, and you're taking something that is supposed to be making their life easier, and instead it's not, and that just creates extra frustration, right? In the past, it was manual, that was a lot of work, but you knew you had to do it. Now you think you have it solved, and so when it doesn't work properly, it really creates frustration. So I'm going to show a video of some folks talking about their file feed experience. And, we'll start with kind of the positive of when it works well and what's great about it. And then we'll kind of hear some issues that folks have had over time.
It feeds to all of our carriers. So it everything is set up on an automatic feed. We audit that, and that we have on occasion found an error in some sort of processing of the feed, but for the most part, it just completely streamlines it, where it can take the people part out of administering the benefits. Um, it does take that lift kind of on the front end, where we have to set it up, we have to put in the plan documents, we have to give people all of the information.
Luckily, Navigator comes with a lot of them created. And so carriers like a Delta was tough to set up, but fine now. MetLife, another one. They already kind of know these guys, so it works out okay. Priority went very well. Vault, not so much. And because, we decide how much fee we want to pay,
Yeah.
they're supposed to data pull it, not doing it. They're doing it manually, and it's causing a lot of problems. So my opinion is I prefer a file feed of some sort, an API, a data, whatever.
So one of our biggest challenges we're having now is with the carrier connection between our payroll system to the vendors. We just completed open enrollment, and there have been numerous glitches that we're in the process of troubleshooting with our payroll provider. We're in the process of troubleshooting with the vendors. And it just kind of, it seems to be a black hole at this point. It's fixed, and then the next week it goes back and it runs and it's messed up again.
I've said often, I'm like, I shouldn't have to babysit this. This should be something that, like, if it's a file feed, it should, run on autopilot. There shouldn't be these, like, I wouldn't say that it's every payroll. I would say probably within the course of the year, maybe once a month. So
That's a lot.
that's frequent enough that it should.
I've had some problems with standard, with primarily employees once they term not being dropped off, they still remain on the bill. They have not, I don't know, it's not a lot. It may be one or two a month.
So you heard there, what are the most frequent issues, which is what we hear, which is that it doesn't update, right? Either adds and drops don't get updated, or during like the information from enrollment doesn't get updated. Whatever it is, it's not reading properly what it's supposed to be, which is again, its whole purpose. And you heard, especially those middle two folks, like kind of that frustration of this is supposed to work, this is supposed to make my life easier. And we hear, actual, besides just the administrative challenges, you know, em employee impact. So, I've talked to someone who's, their CFO went to the dentist and it's like you don't have dental benefits because it was a file feed issue. Someone who's an employee died and their beneficiary went to claim life insurance and turns out the file feed hadn't read in properly and so the life insurance was not recognized as the employee having it. So it can have real issues, but it also just takes up a lot of time for these folks in dealing with it. Again, when there are problems, when it doesn't work well, when there are, you heard that one example, some HRIS and Ben admin platforms have relationships or have experience working with major carriers. And so there's already sort of something set up. And I think you hear when that happens, it's a little easier, right? Because they're sort of a standard operating procedure and they know each other and so they can make it work. But it's a big deal, and file feeds are very important, kind of in the day-to-day life of someone who's managing benefits. Okay, it always tries to start the video again. Sorry about that. Oh, so we talked about kind of all the different technologies that folks are using, and kind of the most important that they're seeing. We also talked to folks about what do they want to see? What do they see coming down the pike? What are they looking for? Where do they see opportunities when it comes to technology and benefits? So that's what we're going to talk about now. And as you might imagine, and you might have seen because I accidentally flipped the slide, we ask someone about opportunities in technology, and what we hear is AI, right? AI is kind of whatever on everybody's mind, regardless of the situation, in terms of being able to make things work better, or find efficiencies, or speed things up, or save money. And employers do see an important role for AI. They all bring it up. I will say, as we go through this section, we had 10 respondents. Nine of them are very enthusiastic about AI. One of them is not. One of them was skeptical. There's going to be people who are not pro AI, but the vast majority were, 9 out of 10. So, most employers are not currently themselves using AI when it comes to their benefits. The exception is we had a few folks who use it to help write materials or communications and employee facing materials or communications about benefits, just to polish it or, help craft communications. One, and I referenced earlier, there was somebody who's rippling and was really positive about them and about their technology and their use of AI. One of one of our employers uses Rippling, they have a decision support tool with AI built in for employees during enrollment. And she's been very happy about that and thinks it's been very effective in helping employees enroll with enrollment and helping educate them. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit about because when you ask them what they're looking for, what they would like to see when it comes to carriers using AI, decision support tools comes up kind of across the board as a way that AI can help. And part of what they would like to see in an ideal world is a decision support tool that integrates past claims as well as information about the employee. We'll look a little more about that on the next slide, or 2 slides, I think. They want to see AI being used in claims processing and adjudication, fraud detection, predictive and analytics, and potentially in guiding healthcare decisions, like working with employees in how they should access care and helping guide them. I want to bring up why employers generally, other than the one exception, really want to see carriers using AI. Because they were very adamant that carriers should be talking about this. They should be leading with this. They're doing a finalist presentation or an annual review or a renewal. They should be leading with how they're going to be using AI or how they are using AI. And that is because employers think if the carrier uses AI, it's going to lower costs. It's going to lower costs for the carrier, right? They're going to be doing things more efficiently. So it's got to lower cost, and that hopefully will then keep costs stable or lower costs for them. And you can see it in this quote, right? I think it's a positive because anything that streamlines and makes things more efficient for carriers to be able to lower their cost, that could help benefit us as companies because the hope would be that would come back downhill, right? That's what's behind it. I mean, to some extent, employee experience for sure, but big picture, biggest challenge from the beginning, right, is cost, cost, cost. And so they see AI as a way to help control those costs. I did mention, though, AI-driven support tools. That was suggested by quite a few of our respondents. One I mentioned used it, but even those that don't, they'd like to see when employees are going through enrollment, have a tool that uses AI. So the ideal would be to use certainly employees' demographic information, their marital status, their kids, their age, everything around that. But also, if possible, employee claims data. So how have they used their benefits in the past? Because that is seen as something that will help drive the best decision support tools that would help employees compare the different plans that are offered to them. It would allow employees to ask specific questions or input information or preferences. So to be able to, say, listen, this is what's most important to me, or, I can't spend more than this amount of money, to be able to give it some inputs to help it as well. The hope would it would help educate employees through this process. And then eventually the goal, right? Make personalized, appropriate recommendations, make the best recommendations possible for that employee. With all of this, it's also important to address privacy concerns, right? To make sure that, employees' data is being protected. If you've got claims data in there, you have to make sure everything's compliant and everything, follows data security. So that is one aspect of where they think AI can play. They also want to leverage both AI and telemedicine for care. Okay, so I mentioned again upfront costs. One way they see driving down claims cost is so they're looking for technology to make things easier, smoother, streamlined, less costly. So they think that, first of all, having employees use telemedicine whenever it's appropriate is going to drive down claims costs. And obviously, telemedicine's been around for a while. It was really exploded during COVID, but it was around before that, and it continues to be around. But employers are not seeing the uptake on telemedicine they would like to. They really expected employees to use it more, and they're trying to figure out ways to encourage employees to use it. So any help carriers could give with that to help, with case studies or examples or education or, to help drive employees, to communication that talks about the benefits for the employee. Employers would welcome tools that use AI to help guide employees when they need care, right? I put in my symptoms or I say what's bothering me, and an AI guided solution is going to recommend what I should do, right? Should I go to the emergency room? Should I go to urgent care? Should I go to make an appointment with my doctor for next week? Should I use telemedicine, right? And hope, the idea is that would point employees to lower cost options where appropriate, right? Obviously, only when appropriate. Um, this is employer perspective. I can't say that employees would agree with this or want this, but certainly from an employer perspective, they see these as potential ways to help them control those costs in leveraging technology. So, the last thing that we heard about, and this wasn't something that we had included in the discussion guide up front, but several employers brought it up as an opportunity within, a technological solution that could help. And so we started asking about it for everybody. And that is claims integration. And when I talk about claims integration, I mean, medical claims integration. So theoretically, you go to the doctor, you're an employee, you have, employer sponsored medical care, go to the doctor, you have broken your arm, and there's a claim filed, right, against your medical insurance for that broken arm. Somehow that then knows, it's all connected, that you have accident insurance through your employer, and it triggers an accident claim, or it automatically adjudicates an accident claim and pays you for that accident claim without you having to do anything. This is something that a few employers brought up. One has it, but on a limited basis because they have it only with the same carrier. So that they use the same carrier for medical and their voluntary benefits. And so they have some form of this. Another, and you'll see this in the video I'm going to show, is supposed to get it, and they have an accident. It's supposed to be again accident and medical. In that case, the accident, it's a different carrier, but it's supposed that his understanding is that this is going to be in place. A few other people had heard of it. Some people had not, right? Had not. And honestly, when you explain to people the idea, it's like magic to them. They can't believe like that it could even happen, and they just think it's the greatest thing. They're very enthusiastic about it. They see it as having incredible value, both from an employee experience and administrative, employee utilization of benefits. And they really see it as something that would be a differentiator, strong differentiator. That said, some of them think it's like, how could that possibly be, right? Within the same carrier, they think, okay, sure. But across carriers, they just are very skeptical that carriers would work together that way. They don't bring, nobody brought up, and we didn't have a deep conversation about it. So we didn't talk about like HIPAA and how this would work and employees would have to give permission and all of that, because obviously those are all pieces of this as well. But it does seem like just this amazing idea to them, and they don't even understand how it could be. So I'm going to play a video of kind of folks talking about the first one, like I mentioned, is the person who's going to be talking about how they're going to be doing this, and then I'll show you. You'll see some other folks' perspective on it.
In the future, this is technology. Our voluntary benefits provider is supposed to auto process claims. So if somebody has, a hospital incident and they chose hospital indemnity, they would pay it out automatically before the person even filed.
I think from the employee perspective, it would kind of help streamline some of the processes for that. And then depending on, the capabilities, if it starts kind of the paperwork process for the disability would be helpful. But then also on the back end of, it triggering them to say, hey, you should apply for FMLA for this. Because that's kind of its own other subject that we find out, oh, so and so's been out for the past week and a half because they had a medical procedure, but they never reached out and they could have been eligible for disability. And their hours should be going towards FMLA, but it's not. So it's
That, yeah, I mean, that would be, I think that could be a key differentiator. Like if we could offer that, I think that would be something that would set us apart as an employer too, right? If that's something, because like if we had that benefit, if we had that, that platform that could do that, that would be something that'd be front and center. It's because I think it shows that guided approach, right? So the human element, why do we do that? Because there's a guided approach to it, right?
Would have huge value. I think it would be really great because again, like employees want to do whatever is the simplest thing. And I think a lot of benefit utilization comes down to laziness, like just not wanting to go and figure out what is my wellness benefit or where do I go for better prescription refills that save me money. Like it just, if it takes work, it's typically something that they don't want to do. And we cover 100% of accident insurance, and we have had one claim this year, and it's been.
And when you talk about future, this would be probably something that would be very, very helpful and use, especially for HR people, right? And employees in general, right? And that's part of it. Like if you can get these companies to, get along and work together, right? But I think technology can solve that easily, right?
So she does go on to say maybe it wouldn't be so easy. First she's like, yeah, it's easy. They'll be able to talk to each other. And then she does kind of acknowledge that there might be other issues besides technology that make that hard to do. And the person before, she got cut off, but in her company, they pay for accident insurance, which is rare, right? It's usually a voluntary benefit. It's not something usually that's employer paid. And they've had one claim, and it was her. She was the only person who's ever filed an accident claim, even though the company pays for it. So she was kind of skeptical that no one else has had an accident. No one else, could have used it. And so was kind of talking about how valuable it would be for that to sort of happen automatically or be triggered in some way through medical claim. So that's what I have for you. I'm happy for any of you. Please feel free to reach out to me if you would like for me to do this as an interactive presentation with your business partners. If you think there's folks within your organization who would find value in this information, I'm happy to do it kind of in a meeting so that there can be a more give and take. Obviously, I couldn't share every single thing that came out of the interviews. So, like I said, I'm happy to do kind of a custom and live interactive approach. But thank you all for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.